Good morning. Good morning and welcome to the Wednesday, February 18th, 2026 informal meeting of our Board of Education. This is an information meeting only. We do not take any votes during this meeting. And I will get assurance that we did post this meeting. I have assurance that it has been posted. We will start with our board member minute, and this morning we have Ms. Grabowski.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good to see everyone today. So I know many of us were in Atlanta for Savannah-Chatham Day recently, where we had the opportunity to meet with community leaders and with members of our legislature. So hopefully those of you who traveled did take advantage of those opportunities. Dr. Watts and Mr. Moss and I had an opportunity to meet with Superintendent Woods to kind of see if he could glean any foresight into what we might be expecting. I think we all know that legislation or education is very much on the mind of our state legislators, as it should be. He did mention that there is some talk about having a mandatory curriculum around literacy, and we expressed our deep concerns that it would only be one particular curricula, given that we have already invested millions of dollars in that. So he heard those concerns, and hopefully we'll share those if that discussion moves forward. The literacy bill, which has been much anticipated, is under financial review to understand what the implications of that would be, which would provide coaching support, which of course we are already doing as a district, but if the state were willing to pick up that tab, obviously that would be welcomed. There's lots of stuff happening every day, so I hope that everyone is signed up for the GSBA legislative updates. They do, I think, a good job of providing the summaries and the status of any pending legislation. So I would encourage each of us to take a moment to read those as they come out. And if there are things that we feel strongly about as a board that we need to come together and take particular action on, that we would do that. I think one of the ones that we do need to continue to watch closely, there's a lot of discussion obviously around property taxes. Obviously we already have the, Stevens Day from the homestead exemption and the additional changes that came last year. But there's also conversations about eliminating property taxes, which of course for us would be a significant shift in the way in which we provide much of our funding. So please be mindful of that. If there's other information that comes out that we need to discuss, I would encourage us to do that, because that is obviously a very significant shift in the way we fund our operations. So I don't know if anyone else has anything to add that was there for the day, but that's my update.
Thank you very much. All right. Our first presentation today is on teacher vacancies and employee retention. And thank you, Ramon.
As Mr. Ray and Dr. Panton make their way up to the podium, just want to emphasize and reinforce the fact that talent management is simply not an HR function. Of course, you see HR representatives in front of you. It's everybody's job to support human resources and talent management across our district. And ultimately, it's a student achievement strategy. We know when we have excellent teachers in front of our students excel. I'm excited about this presentation because it highlights measurable progress we have made in decreasing teacher vacancies, strengthening retention across our district, expanding programs like Grow Your Own, and elevating our employees' voices. You'll also see some important feedback from our January survey. We give a culture survey twice a year. And we think some of the feedback that we're getting from that is attributing to the progress. And I'll close by saying people stay where they feel they are supported and seen. Our responsibility is to ensure we're creating a culture and systems that reflect that belief. So with that said, I'll turn it over to our Human Resources team.
Yes, good morning. Good morning, Board President, members of the board, and Dr. Watts. We're proud to have this presentation with you. Joining with me with Dr. Michael Patton, Executive Director of Talent Services. Strategic Priority 3 centers around our people. No strategic plan succeeds unless the workforce believes in it, feels supported by it, and chooses to stay. What you will see today is not simply a set of metrics. It is evidence that culture, leadership, and strategy are beginning to align. Under Strategic Priority 3, our charge is clear: to recruit, retain, recognize highly effective, student-focused workforce. We measure these three indicators with employee retention, employee perceptions of being valued and appreciated, and reduction in teacher vacancies. Sorry. In fiscal year 2025, we established a formal employee retention database baseline of 90.5%. For school year 26, our target is to maintain at least 90% retention with CPI, which is CPI data collection underway this spring, and CPI is the Classified Certified Personnel Inventory. Retention is no longer anecdotal. It is now measurable, monitorable, and actionable. With the survey data that you can see in winter 2026, 49% of our employees feel valued, which is up 3.7 percentage points from last year. 51% of our employees feel their contributions are appreciated, which is also up 1.3% from last year. 51% are satisfied with the district culture, which is up 3.5% from last year. People don't leave systems, they leave experiences. Retention strategies in action. Retention is improving because our leadership expectations are clearer. Employee voice is elevated. Career pathways are expanding, and compensation is better aligned. People stay where they feel supported, valued, supported, and seen. Going to turn it over to Dr. Patton now.
Thank you. Good morning. When we lead with retention, vacancy reduction becomes sustainable. In the Office of Talent and Human Resources, we strongly believe that retention is the new recruitment. As Mr. Ray shared, when culture strengthens, stability follows, and that stability is reflected in the teacher vacancy rate reduction. Yeah. Got it. As you can see, we have made a tremendous decrease in our teacher vacancy data and teacher vacancy report. As of January 2026, the vacancy rate declined by 3.2 percentage points year over year, exceeding our school year 26 target by nearly 3%. This equates to 61 classroom teacher vacancies at this time. So the question becomes, how? How did we do this work? The reduction in teacher vacancies did not begin with recruitment. It began with the shift in culture. There are 3 culture-based strategies that fueled this progress. First, leadership development. It focused on relational trust, engagement, and retention. We invested strengthening how leaders lead because leadership shapes culture. When supervisor support is clear and consistent, trust increases both at the school level and the district level. Second, we elevated employee voice and recognition to ensure that staff feel valued. When employees feel heard, they feel connected, and connected employees are more likely to stay. Third, we expanded workforce pathways through employee referrals and classified to certified opportunities. When employees see opportunity within the system, they build their future within the system. And these are not separate strategies. These are all culture-building moves that had to be made. Under Dr. Watt's leadership, we have been intentional about shaping culture. And as we've said, leadership shapes culture. Culture delivers results. And when culture is strengthened, retention improves. When retention improves, vacancies decline. So the decrease in teacher vacancies is not simply a recruitment outcome. It is the result of intentional leadership being strengthened and culture being strengthened, as well as disciplined execution. The next slide reflects how that culture translated into measurable progress in talent services within the Office of Talent and Human Resources. When I was asked what was my leadership move as the executive director of talent services, I really sat back and reflected on what is it that I did differently. And what I did differently was shift the work that we did in talent services. This slide reflects a shift in how the work to reduce teacher vacancies was led, not just what was done. As part of our district leadership development efforts, our team studied the 4 disciplines of execution by Chris McKenzie, Sean Covey, and Jim Hulling. The goal wasn't to adopt another framework, but to strengthen our ability to execute on what really matters. We applied those principles to treating teacher vacancy reduction as our wildly important goal in talent services. That meant narrowing our focus, setting clear targets, and creating consistent accountability for our team members. We had weekly monitoring where we set up scorecards, and Dr. Watts likes to say it this way: you play different when we're keeping score. And so when teacher vacancies was part of my scorecard, meaning evaluation, I played real different. And so we monitored. This created a focus and visibility. My team could see the progress in real time and adjust very quickly. Another thing that we did was I have a team of 20 in talent services, and we divided up the team where everyone had dedicated schools. And so our team was stay in contact with the leadership, and that was a leadership move that shifted how we went from being transactional to shared ownership with the schools. And my team members took that very seriously. They wanted to reach out to their principals and say, hey, I see this vacancy still here. Here's some applications. You know, what are your needs? And so that took them from just processing hires to being part of hiring. We also did some targeted outreach where my team would be proactive and not reactive in how we communicated opportunities and address vacancies. Sometimes we would just find different employee groups, and we may send them information about how to become a teacher if you were interested. And we just were planting seeds. And next thing you know, people are emailing back a couple of weeks later, hey, I was thinking about, you know, the email that I received. So we became very much part of that. We went out and we did face-to-face alternative pathway to teaching sessions so that we could walk people through the process if their desire was to become a teacher. And so we shifted the work that we did in talent services so that our WIGs turned vacancy reduction from an aspiration into actual execution. We also went out and upped our teacher recruitment efforts because you can't recruit who can't see you. And as you all have probably seen around the community, SCC PSS is very visible now. Our focus was putting our footprints wherever they were not. And so what you see here, we were on school billboards, so you know we already have marquees. So all of our schools who have marquees, we asked them, hey, could you put something on your marquee for us. We went in the mall. We like, why aren't we in the mall? You know, you can see we have yard signs. We brought back our educator fair, and we hadn't had an educator fair since 2019. And so we had our first educator fair, and we will be having another one this year on March 21st. So that's exciting. We're in the airport. We're on billboards. We're everywhere. And so our biggest thing is making sure that SCCPSS is visible in the community. And we had several teacher wins. We had 71 teachers were hired by an employee referral. We had 34 classified staff become teachers this school year. And our critical field incentives, we hired 124 teachers in critical field areas. So as Dr. Watts indicated, people stay where they feel supported, where they feel valued, and where they feel seen. And so our next steps, especially as we are in the new iteration of what our strategic plan will look like in the Office of Talent and Human Resources, our hope is that we will certainly see pillars that allow us to continue to attract and retain talent, to develop the talent that we have, and to grow our own talent. So those would be our next steps. We'll take any questions.
Ms. Grabowski.
Thank you for the presentation, and it's great to see the trend declining in vacancies. On the question in the survey around do you feel valued, the culture question, it looked like it was about a 50% positive, which unfortunately means that there's the other side of that coin. Do we allow for opportunities for narrative about what would make you feel more valued, what would improve, what would change you from a yes to or from a no to a yes?
Yes, we do. We do have that. I don't know if Stacy wants to expand a little bit.
So for all of the survey questions, or I shouldn't say all of the survey questions, there is an open-ended response. So any additional feedback that those participants want to share, they can go into specifics, and we share that information with each of the chiefs. So yes, they do have the opportunity to share specifics around that.
Do you know if we saw any kind of trends or themes come out of any of those open-ended, or I don't know if we've done that kind of analysis?
We have not done that type of analysis, but I will say, in general, there are some themes and patterns. Not the concern, but what comes up is every participant doesn't show or provide a response, but there are some trends and patterns, and they're also aligned to some things that we're seeing that we'll talk about in near future from our strategic plan survey data. So some of those things are trending in the same direction, and some patterns that are emerging.
Okay.
And just to support that, one of the things that we have implemented this year is stay interviews. And we are right here at the middle of the year, so our leaders are all doing mid-year conferences. And so what we've asked out of the Office of Talent and Human Resources is that everyone try to collect like 3 to 5 of those stay interview, to try to do at least 3 to 5 so that we can kind of look at reoccurring themes of what people are saying. And so it's our hope that when we collect this data from these stay interviews, we will see reoccurring themes of what is making people feel valued, because different things make other people feel different, feel valued, feel appreciated, or feel that they have voice. And so with the implementation of stay interviews, we're really hoping that we're going to get some reoccurring themes to help us also make different decisions based on what we hear.
Okay.
And we have so many employees that return every year, so that was one of the things that we wanted to try to also look at. Why are employees returning? They left, they returned, right? So those are the things that we're in the process of doing as we look forward, is because people return. Grass may not be greener on the side, or whatever it is, they came back. So we also want to focus on that as well.
Good. That's fantastic. Just 2 quick things. Are we on the application process? I think historically you would apply for a position within the district, and you might end up at any school across the county if you apply for that position. And I've had comments made to me of, I would be interested in being a teacher, but, if you live in Port Wentworth, you probably don't want to teach on the islands. So are we looking at a process that would allow applicants to provide a little bit more like, I really want to stay in this geographic area, or be able to meet what they're looking for and not just what we're looking for?
That's a great question, and we battle with that often. And so what we do, because we start advertising because teachers, educators are looking to relocate early in the year, and it's middle of the year. Our leaders don't always know where the vacancies are. So we always start out this early where we have pools so that we're collecting applications and getting them qualified and released. And then as principals begin to know that I have a math position, then they often put in requisitions for their individual schools. And so that's how we've been, just doing it just so that we can get applicants early and get them qualified. So that's our rationale. But many principals do, once they know that they have a vacancy, submit a requisition to advertise specifically for their location. And we welcome that. But we also always want to have a pool of ELA teachers in case we get a resignation today. We don't want to have to get into was it advertised for this period of time? Did they have time? We want people to always be available for interviews. So that's why we balance having both of them.
And I would say another, a lot of it's technology. Maybe we get there at some point, but part of the problems we had in the past is if we advertise specifically for a math teacher, at Beach High School, or a math teacher at Savannah Arts, there'd be a 2-week period. And so how would the principal at Beach see the ones at Savannah Arts?
Right.
And so we'd have applicants complain, well, I applied because they saw them, because they applied for this opening. They didn't realize they didn't apply overall. And so there's another opening somewhere else. So that's our challenge is we keep having openings, having that applicant apply and then have to come back and apply again and have to come back and apply again. We keep it, right now we have it where they're applying in a pool, so all principals can see that pool. So it's a trade-off, and we can certainly still look at that.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'm glad we're cognizant of it and thinking about how
Yes,
we
we are.
And then, sorry, one last question. Are we looking at any non-traditional pathways, encouraging people who may not currently be teachers to think about it? We've had several of our district teachers of the year that then go on to be state teachers of the year that came from non-traditional education backgrounds. So is that an area that we're exploring?
We've always explored that. I was a non-traditional teacher. My degree was in computer science. I didn't, that wasn't my pathway, and we certainly continue to do that even today. That's why we have a GTAP. We end up bringing our TAP program back, and so we can internally be able to have our own teachers progress through. We also have brought in a lot of teachers through our master teacher, where we have a master teacher and then we have our resident teacher. So we're doing that kind of process too, where somebody's not even certified yet and they're trying to become certified. So we're trying to do those pathways where we're trying to get any of our employees that have a degree or have interest in being a teacher and trying to find a way to, sometimes they just don't know. We've done
Well, and I guess
alternative.
I'm thinking beyond just our employees. I'm thinking the
Yeah.
general public.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt
No,
you.
no, I'm sorry.
Absolutely. We've been doing this for quite some time, and sometimes, I live in the certification world, so a lot of people don't always understand it. So I'll connect it for you when you all see we are a strategic waiver district and we list out all of the ways that we can waive certification. This ties to that.
Yeah.
So each year we're hiring teachers who you have a degree in English, and so we may be hiring you and then you complete the certification process. So this has been going on in the state of Georgia easily 15, 20 years. So it's becoming more and more, especially as we bring on CTAE pathways. I mean, where are we going to get the barber or the welding instructor? Culinary arts, these aren't traditional college of education programs, so I certainly see it expanding even greater the way the future is looking, especially with the expansion of CTAE pathways.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Okay, Ms. Hall, Mr. Smith, and then Dr. Hoskins Brown.
Okay, very quickly, I'd like to focus a little bit more on relationship building and the role that principals play in that, because I think that is crucial to making a person feel, I want to stay here, I want to come back. One of the criticisms about me when I was a principal was that I tended to favor certain teachers. And of course, yeah, the teachers there every day, busting their, doing everything they could, staying in touch with the families, everything that you could want. There's a human proclivity towards that, and you have to be very careful. And I took that criticism very seriously and changed it. So I think principals need to be reminded all the time. Don't just surround yourself or put your attention on your, top flyers. Cultivate relationships with the other people in your school, because you're going to need all of them. I don't think we can emphasize that enough. I don't know how the rest of you feel, but that was my experience, that if you want to keep your teachers, you make them feel like you can't run that school without them.
And thank you, Ms. Hall. We do have a question on the survey that relates to that, about how you feel related to your supervisor. So employees, and I think that presentation will be in the future by Dr. Taylor, but certainly that is something being monitored, and those supervisors are looking at the principals, all areas, no matter what division it is. You can see, how do your employees feel, how comfortable they can be coming to you as the supervisor. So that is something that we're looking at that we weren't monitoring before, but you're right, that's something we are monitoring today.
Mr. Smith?
Thank you for your presentation. I'll be very expeditious in my question. On page 4, retention is holding at 90.5, correct? Meeting the KPI target, but yet on page 5, we only see 49.9 of our employees reporting that they feel valued and 51.7 feeling appreciated. My questions to you would be this. One, how do we reconcile strong retention rates with relatively low feeling value metrics?
I would say we've progressed from the beginning to where we are. We've made progress. Is it where we want to be? No, but we have made progress. And if you think about it, we probably moved, I think, 10% or something like that. That's probably somewhere where we are. So if we were at 82%, 83%, and now we're up to 90%, you have this small fraction that we're actually having that movement. But we have a lot to do. And there are pockets of places where we were talking about the supervisors that working with the administrator. There are pockets that we have to work on, and we know those areas that we need to work on, and we have to work on those relationships, because that's where it starts. Where somebody feels you don't want employees feeling like they can't come to work, and they're having anxiety on their way to work. Well, there are some situations where they do. We're reducing those. They're not eliminated, but we're reducing those instances that those happen.
Tell me this, this effort is led by your department?
No, it's led by everybody, all the leaders, starting from the superintendent, with initiative down. All the leaders have that, because we can't control what happens in other units or other areas or how to school, but that principal can.
Okay, so with that being said, let me ask you this. Can you name 3 things that what 3 things here with SCCPSS make you feel valued? That's a hard question.
One of the things that make me feel valued is the cultivation, the leadership development that I have seen explode over the past 2 to 3 years. That the fact that a budget was set aside so that we could have book talks, we could read books together. That makes me feel valued, that someone knows we need to be reading something other than nonfiction policy. We need to be reading, leadership development. It's very safe in executive. The extended cabinet has expanded, that it's not this place that only the chiefs go. And what if the chief doesn't tell us the information? No, we're right in the room alongside with other team members, and we're hearing the information in real time, and we're being asked, well, what do you think? You're the person that's on the front line doing the work. What do you think? What is your opinion? The fact that the board understood that we needed to do a compensation study. It wasn't about us individually. It was about all of our employees. And when the budget came, you all could have said, oh, no, that is too much. But you understood a bigger picture. When some people associate money with feeling valued and appreciated, and that's the reality.
Right.
For me, it's more about purpose. And so being that when I can express myself or be part of, and not just me, I don't have to go. I can send a team member, and they're welcomed in the space. They're welcome to offer opinions, because all of us have experienced Savannah-Chatham County Public School System different, so every voice matters. The way that the district sends out so many surveys to collect voice, I always ask when I hear murmurs, what do you mean your voice isn't heard? Did you not do the survey? Because did you not get the call, the telephone? I'm a community member, I'm a parent, and I'm an employee. So I have 3 different ways that I must be on 3 different call outs, because I'm gonna get the information. And so it's not that we're not giving people the opportunity. It's, are you taking the opportunity? And sometimes in the Office of Talent and Human Resources, we have to step back and say, you know what, we're not gonna own this. Was a choice decision. Yes, we're not where we wanna be on our data, but not all of our employees are speaking up either. And so we're working to say, let more people give voice, because maybe if 50% more speak up, maybe the number's even higher. Is it something that we're not doing to get the information to you? Do we need to put it on an app? How can we get to it? What is hindering us? The ways that voice is out here today, like I've never seen. This is my 23rd year. So I'm excited about where we're going and making sure people feel valued, making sure people feel appreciated. And I'm speaking, as a person who has a supervisor as well, who leads a team as well. Our team is taking the same survey as anyone else. And when you see the data, you'll see in the Office of Talent and Human Resources, we're not perfect, but we're leading the charge about culture. How we treat our staff matters too. So I've given you more than 3.
I'm sold. I wanted Mr. Ray to respond, but you did a great job. You did a great job. Last question for you. The location for the Educators Fair, is that already?
It is at Jenkins High School on March 21st from 9 to 12. No shameless plug.
There you go. Thank you so much.
Okay. Dr. Hoskins-Brown, then Dr. Howard Hall, and then Dr. Brinkman.
Thank you. I appreciate this information and the things that I'm learning about how you're trying to get to a better understanding of what keeps our employees. So the benefit of getting recognized later is you get to build on questions on what other people are talking about. So one of the things that I just heard was participation in the survey. And in the federal government, we have the Federal Employee Viewpoint Survey. And we also struggle with having people respond. And in our monthly staff meetings, people are saying, please participate because we're making decisions based on what your ideas are. And so there are incentives for responding to that survey. I think maybe in the past, maybe like the group that had the greatest participation got like 1 hour early dismissal one day or something like that. There's also competition between units, like our branch, making sure that we had 100% participation. So there may be other ways to kind of get that going. One of the questions I had is about feeling valued, having your contributions appreciated, and your view on district culture. We've asked those questions for decades. Do we have longitudinal data on comparable questions to know how we're doing over time, like over the last 5 years, pulling that question from previous districts? Because we've asked about climate every year, so I know we have surveys that we've already deployed. So,
I don't have an answer for that. I know for the
Yes.
last 2 years, I'm sorry.
Yes,
Dr.
we
Taylor.
do have longitudinal data, and we've looked over, and we're looking over the last 3 years. I'm sure we have more historical data, but specifically, we've, in recent years, been looking over the last 3 years, and what we've seen is still an increase. Though we have a ways to go, every touch point that we have, we see an increase.
okay, thank you. I would love to see longer.
We don't have, I don't know that
Yeah.
we have that.
I don't think those questions would align. I think that would be something
I
we
don't
have to
have,
look at.
I don't know the question, so I can't say, but I'm happy to see.
We can look at
Yeah,
it.
so in the data area, there's always been a question about positive climate
Has that a state survey or has that been a local survey?
it's been part of the board accountability plan.
We can
So
look into
Yes.
that.
it may take some digging.
Yeah.
But there's always been a question about what's your work environment been like? Feeling valued, the contributions being appreciated, maybe not, but there's always been one like, do you think we value you? Do you like being here?
Got it.
And it would be interesting to know over a longer period of time because retention is always high compared to happiness. And when we've talked about it in the past, it means I'm unhappy, but I'm not leaving. And that's not what that's not what we want. And that's,
Exactly.
that's not the only story of those
Right.
data. But high retention, but only 50% of a positive climate means you're staying for something else. And what is that? I mean, as a federal employee, I could tell you my whole list about, why, I've not gone, even though there's some things that are not positive over the course of my career. So I think it'd be interesting to look at that over time because I think that there are things that we can do that don't cost money that may push up those positive feelings about culture, value, and contributions. The other comment that I have another of questions, I think 2 questions and a comment. The other comment I have is terrific effort on the stay interviews. The board has talked about needing that information for years, and sometimes it's needed to understand what happened, what was pre-climactic. Like there's a climax of something happening. Holy cow, what was going on before that, And why could we not know that without paying $25,000 or $40,000 for a consultant analysis when maybe we just could have been listening differently? So I really, really applaud you for getting that information. And I hope also that you will be in those interviews listening for, I can't remember what slide it was, listening for what you've said on slide 8. So you have a strategy of leadership development being focused on relational trust, like listening in those interviews. Are you hearing evidence of, are there artifacts related to relational trust? And, elevating employee voice, evidence of people utilizing pipelines. It's like I'm getting kind of geeked out and excited about those interviews because they could be coded.
Yes.
You could code the interview and you could get some data and know statistically the most common statement is,
Yes.
out of 50 people, 35 people referred to this term that refers to whatever this topic is. So anyway, really excited about that. Thank you. Then the 2 questions I have is how does, and these may be challenging and it's okay if someone needs to get back with me, how does the low vacancy rate reconcile with the high amount of unused teacher salaries that we've had in the last 2 budget cycles? So we've been able to adjust our budget and move some things around because we've had such a high amount in vacancy, the high dollar amount in vacancy salaries, but the table that shows our vacancies, what is that, slide? I guess that's 7. Yeah, slide 7 has a very, very low vacancy rate. How do we understand those 2 things together?
And I just want to make sure I'm clarifying what you're asking, Dr. Hoskins-Brown. You're asking about when later on the budget, later on in the year, there's a transfer that's done related to teachers, or are you talking about just overall the vacancy factor or vacancies and why we have that amount? Which
Yeah, just the overall
Okay,
vacancy
yes,
factor. At
overall.
the end of the year,
Yes.
we always have this lump sum that feels kind of big.
Yes.
And it feels like it would be bigger than 7%. So I would just want to
So you're
reconcile that
absolutely
for
right
me
with-
and for people who keep pointing that out.
Yes,
in
you're
the
correct.
community.
When Dr. Watts came, she was looking at that and she asked questions about, well, why do we have all these vacancies that are unfilled? Yet we can give you good data on teachers. There are other positions that we have created. We had a lot of, you may recall, we had a lot of bus drivers. We know we're not hiring 350 bus drivers, but we had 350 bus driver positions, right? So eliminating those down to get to something that's more realistic of where we are today. And there are many different, on the classified side, many different positions that are like that. So teachers, we're honing in on teachers and we can see where they are. So when you see that vacancy factor, it's really about all the other positions. And I know that my colleagues have been working on trying to reduce those to make it more of a real number. What are we actually trying to fill? And I think that's kind of going to lower that expectation as we move forward on what that vacancy factor is. But that's where that comes from. And also, when you're looking at this time of year where we're looking at this survey, position might have been vacant since July. So there's that accumulation of money, even if we fill or even if we don't have it, there's still an accumulation of money. But on the teacher side, we do a real good job when it comes to teachers.
Okay, so that's helpful. So this is teacher vacancy rate. That wouldn't be calculated in here for bus drivers. And so the number of teacher vacancies is low, but it also points to something that's troubling. There are schools that have had vacancies and substitutes all year in an ELA class or all year in a mathematics class. At least I've heard of a couple of these cases in District 2. So that means that's a vacancy, and it feels like a small number because that's just one position, but the impact of the little people in that room
Correct.
is really, really great. It makes me a little nervous about how we're applying preference in position. And Ms. Grabowski asked about, how can you choose? How does a instructor have the opportunity to choose? And I think that I would love to be able to increase that sense of happiness that feeds our retention and has the sense of value that allows people to give choice. But we also know that if a vacancy has existed all year, nobody chose that position. And we need somebody in that position. We need people to serve at the highest need of the district. And so there's got to be some balance. And I don't know how to do that, but I trust y'all to figure it out. All right, this is my last question. And this is a hard one, and it relates to something that Ms. Grabowski taught me a couple of years ago around having these non-traditional professionals. And I think we had the conversation as a board about this at some point. Non-traditional professionals finding their way into instructional tracks. So we have our traditional pathway to growing. We have paraprofessionals who decide they want to teach. But if we have someone with an MFA in a particular area or a DBA or a PhD engineer or something, and we want to bring them into the classroom, what they would make on the competitive market, we just can't even get close to that. And that's a challenge. So my question is, what are your compensation challenges with our level system in bringing in these non-traditional teachers for these tracks that you said you're able to make it work, but what are some of the compensation challenges that we can affect that keep you from being able to fill some of those slots?
Well, you don't realize, but you've already helped us to do it. When I first joined HR, from the school side, one of the things, and this was in kind of Georgia law when it comes to experience, one of the teacher experience is you follow the Georgia law about one-to-one and how you grant teacher experience, and they give us a whole document of what we are to follow. And one of the things that they said that they have in there is that when it came to like CTAE fields, let's say the welder, I don't know why I'm so interested in welding. And HVAC, that's my two new things. Like, why didn't I go to school for this? In the experience rule, you only could give up to 7 years of experience. Well, who is leaving their position for that? And one of the things, when it came to us bringing the strategic waiver, we wrote in about granting one-to-one experience for full-time equivalency, as long as they had, worked the full year and could show. And so that may have seemed isolated, but that's a big deal to go from only granting up to 7 to, no, we can give one-to-one experience as long as it was full-time and verifiable, just like we do any other teacher position. So something like that, it didn't connect at the time, but you all read and accepted that, so.
And also when those applicants, you're right about not being able to compete a lot of times with pay, but sometimes there's just, being a teacher, being off, there are other situations. However, value proposition, however, if you're telling somebody that, okay, you have 20 years and I can only give you 7, even though they would have accepted that they're mentally blocked because you're only giving me 7, when you give them 20, now they at least say, okay, I'm equitable. I may not like where this salary is, but now I at least know you're giving me everything related to my experience. And I think that has helped because we have had people decline because of that. So now they're at least making an even decision as far as the salary, and it may not be enough, but at the same time, we're not insulting them in some cases, as they would say, by offering them 7 years when the state said we can only do 7. So.
Okay, Dr. Howard Hall.
Good morning, and I appreciate your presentation, and I appreciate all the work that you guys are doing. My comment is, there are some cases whereas teachers do not want to leave the district, they want to leave the particular school where they are based on collegial relationships or school culture. So what are you all doing to monitor and document the movement of those teachers? And is there anything being done to investigate or find the root causes of the underlying issues why these teachers are wanting to transfer from these schools? Because in many cases, we lose teachers because they maybe in some cases don't have the ability or the opportunity to transfer, and things continue to escalate, and sometimes we end up seeing them sitting right here doing a hearing of things that could have been avoided if they could have been transferred to a school that was more conducive to their teaching style. So I know that's a lot in one particular statement, but I know it's an issue with the transfers. And if we see an exodus of teachers wanting to transfer from a school, what are we doing about that leadership there? Because apparently there's a problem within that culture and leadership.
Sure. We have a couple of things. We do allow a voluntary district internal transfer each year. So teachers can participate in that. And then we do listen to those individual situations, and we will, if we need to, we will raise it to the Office of School Leadership to help us make a decision. We're not working in isolation in the Office of Talent and Human Resources. We're not principal supervisors. So we certainly will raise that. We have added a question on our internal transfer application where we're asking, why are you requesting a transfer? Now, we only can kind of collect themes based on what people are willing to share with us, but it is a start for us to kind of look at reoccurring themes. People do follow leadership, and that's not a secret. So sometimes when you have change in leadership, it's going to be some shifts. People follow good leaders. Everybody wants a good leader. It makes Sunday night exciting. So, but we are, and if we see if I see something, I'm not just collecting data because I have nothing else to do. I have a great life. So if I'm gonna ask for something, I want to look at it so that we can make really informed decisions. And we're just looking at things differently now. One, because we have technology available to help us assess things differently. I love dissertation writing, but I didn't like going line by line looking for reoccurring themes. Now we have tools to help us find the reoccurring themes, and I'm not afraid to use those tools to help me if I can just, get the data. And so we can move and make some different decisions just because of the technology that's available to us. And we're trying to ask the right questions, because Savannah-Chatham County Public School System is a great place, and we want everyone to feel that. And so we've got to do some things differently than what we've done in the past.
And I'll add, under the leadership of Dr. Barnes and Office of School Leadership, one of the things, they have more tools now. So this question that we were talking about on the survey about how employees feel about their supervisor, okay, that's a number, right? We also can have a number that we're providing. These are the number of people that have requested a transfer. You don't know what it is, but there are more data points that we have that could at least inform them that they may not have had in the past. And I'm sure Dr. Barnes is listening right now, and certainly will be taking this information, because there are other data points that they have. We get individual and employee relations. There may be issues that come up. Are there patterns? We communicate those with the school, the Office of Schools. So those individual situations that we have 3 teachers, or we have 3 paras, or whatever the case may be, we're communicating with them about that. And is there a pattern right there, or isn't there? So it is more data that we have today. So certainly I think we're on that track, Dr. Howard Hall, to be able to look at those things differently.
Dr. Brinkman?
More on the data. Can you share what the scale was? Like, what was the Likert scale, or what were the choices that each respondent had?
Yes.
Is it just agree, disagree?
Let Dr. Taylor.
It is agree, disagree, strongly disagree.
Okay, so they have to pick one side of the fence. They can't just sit in the middle and be like, yeah?
Right.
Okay. And then what was our percent return?
We had 2,274 respondents.
So about 50%-ish?
A little less than 50.
A little
less than 50%?
A little less, yes.
Okay. I'm not super concerned. Keep chopping and going, but most satisfaction surveys fall on a bell-shaped curve. And you could have asked them a couple questions leading into that survey of like, how was yesterday? How was your week? And it couldn't even be related to school. I love when those things hit my email and I'm like, oh, I'm mad. 0, 0, 0, all the way down, like that student doing their standardized test in 10 minutes. So I would love, and I hate giving people more work, but this is the nerd in me wanting to pull out the respondents that took the time to score and then write a comment.
Okay.
Whether it be positive or negative. Complaining is not a strategy. Tell me some things. Versus the respondent that, checked all, filled in the things, but didn't give anything to really see if there's a difference there. And that, again, is a lot of work. So don't, unless you think, hey, I would like to know that. Because sometimes I think the individual, even if there's somebody that's unsatisfied and they spend the time to give us things versus just are 70% of our unsatisfied people not giving us anything.
Right.
Okay, thanks.
Good point.
We can definitely take a look at that.
Yeah.
And I
don't know.
transposed the numbers.
That's the nerd in me sitting here too long while everybody else was pontificating, so.
So go back to your first question. I transposed the numbers. It was 2,717.
Yeah.
All right. Sorry, was that Dr. Brinkman?
I was just saying thank you.
Okay. Ms. Hall, and then I have a comment.
I don't want to start at round 2 because I've had my turn, but I do want to just ask. We've kind of really focused in on teachers, but I want to talk about expertise up the scale. The people who surround Dr. Watts, who advise and inform her, and that tier under them, the ones who report to our chiefs. How do we get experts into the system for that? Like, it seems, I look at academic affairs, and what I see are some of our finest principals are now in academic affairs, but where is the lifeblood from outside coming, and what are we doing to enhance? And that could be the mechanics, capital projects, academics, all of our different endeavors, where do we pull in expertise that has not come through the regular College of Education channels?
Well, I think on most of those positions, we are getting people in those areas. Sometimes we have promotions from within, but we are hiring from outside. You'll see those hiring from outside, whether it's at the chief level with the recent moves that we've had since Dr. Watts, but we've also had that happen at the executive director level. So I think we are doing that. When we think about our mechanics and those areas, sometimes we also battle, or we also have to, be concerned, or, people want upward mobility. So when you ask that question we have questions about what opportunities do you see? So we're asking that question. So we have to make sure we are at least, that people don't feel like there's, only people coming from outside or only people inside. So there's a balance there as well. So I think we're doing a good job with that. But you're right, Ms. Hall, we are focused on it. And we do look at that, and we do work with those areas when it comes to hiring and staff members.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so I have just a couple of questions. We spent a lot of money over the last few years, money well spent, I might say, on retraining our teachers in the science of reading. That was because we were getting students from universities that did not teach the science of reading. Now, there are some colleges that do teach the science of reading. So are we doing a better job of recruiting from those colleges so we don't have to spend money retraining teachers?
We are, and also the Georgia Professional Standards Commission, which most people know them about certification, they also create all the guidelines for how College of Educations must function. So they're the program, as program providers, you have to follow the guidance. And so what they have done is ensured that the science of reading is now embedded in the program providers' programs. So we can't control that if you're outside of the state of Georgia, which on our side, we have added something in our onboarding paperwork that lets us know, have you received this type of training? If so, can you provide us the credential so that we can give that information to our curriculum team immediately, who's been hired, who's not had that training. But I think we will see it begin to decrease because the Georgia Professional Standards Commission has embedded that into program providers' curriculum.
And I would add, but I don't want to, create a thought that we're going to eliminate it. We have so many people. Georgia doesn't produce enough teachers, and we can't produce. And if you do have a para come up, guess what? They don't have they don't have that, right? So I don't want to. So we're all doing a better job with Georgia, but we also have to recognize that a lot of our teachers that come into the district are not from Georgia. Whether they're international, whether they're coming even up a pipeline. They're a para coming from our district, or, we have a school nutrition manager, 2 school nutrition managers that became teachers this year. They didn't go through that. So just want to make sure we're recognizing that side of it too.
Okay. Okay. That was not the answer I wanted.
Can you tell us what the ideal answer would be?
No.
Universities to be teaching it.
Well, we want that too,
That's it.
but that has not been mandatory.
No, what I'm saying, I am looking at this not only from education, but I'm also looking at this fiscally. I mean, it affects us fiscally if we are having to spend money every year to retrain teachers. I am all for filling seats and with teachers, but I would much rather fill seats with teachers that we're not having to retrain. Now, some of the universities are getting better at it, and yes, the PLC has changed that, but it's going to take a while for that to happen. So my question is more about, about strategy in recruitment than anything, which leads into my next question. And by the way, I love this presentation, and you're doing a great job, okay? Please do not take this as criticism. But when we're deciding on how to advertise, what do we base that on? Have we ever spoken with media buyers, because there are certain facts about effective advertising, and what's most effective, what's going to get to all of those target markets, including non-traditional.
We do. We look at that often, and we also, so we look at that, and we're looking at different strategies for the upcoming school year. One of the things that we're looking at is something that not so much to get more people, but to get to you more often.
Right.
We all have patterns, and so it's important, we can look at something on our phone, and then we're at home watching on a Fire Stick, and it's on the commercial. Then we get on the iPad, and it pops up there. And so as technology is changing, so is our strategy, and making sure that the people that we work with have that technology that follows users as well. But also we have looked at on our applications, where do people tell us they hear about us the most? Because that matters to us as well. And so we will be shifting now that we have that information. Yeah.
All right, thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Kachmar.
How much do people say pay is the number one issue for recruitment or retention?
Well,
We
that
actually
question.
curtailed asking that question, because it was, I don't think anybody's gonna ever say, I make enough.
Understood, but in my world, the employment law world, 90% of the reason people take a job or not is the salary wasn't high enough.
Sure.
Or the benefits package with salary wasn't high enough. So I go back to the conversation we've had for a long time, which is I want us to be in the top 5% or 10% of any district in Georgia, to take that issue off the table, because I think it's a primary driver for most people. I mean, everybody in this room is driven to serve kids and driven to educate, but I also want to pay my mortgage.
Sure,
Right?
absolutely.
So-
Absolutely.
And I think the compensation study helped us right-size some of that. I don't know that we're meeting the aspiration of being in the top 5%. We could probably certainly do some research on that, but the compensation study that we did last year did bolster many salaries in our district, which got us in at least the market range of large and small districts near us. Did not necessarily look at, what a bus driver makes compared to what a bus driver makes in a non-educational setting, but it did look at education salaries in general. But
Yeah, and
don't know that we're at the 5%
I hear you.
yet.
It's aspirational, I acknowledge that.
Yes.
The other issue is that market study was education,
Yes,
and we're not competing with education. We're competing with the ports and UPS and Amazon and
absolutely.
FedEx and
Absolutely.
Hyundai and Gulfstream and.
I think
so-
the other thing that you'll see as our new strategic plan is developing is we also have to do a better job of communicating a complete value proposition. Again, salary is important. I do not want to minimize that. But our bus drivers also don't work summers. They get weekends off. They have 2 weeks at Christmas. They have a spring break. UPS is not going to provide that. Other organizations don't. That's a value proposition that may or may not appeal to some people, right? But there are other things that I think we can highlight that speak to the complete package.
I agree, and and on the front end, being proactive and saying, here's what this job provides that private sector might not.
Right, that value prop,
Most
that,
people, some
don't
people
think about
don't go through that analysis.
right, well,
Right.
we are,
They just see the number.
we are. That'll be a big part of our next strategic plan. We have to tell the whole story.
Any other questions? Any other questions? Yes, Ms. Grabowski.
I wasn't going to say anything, but you asked me. So just the one last thing. So the surveys are great. And I think sometimes people get survey fatigue or they don't think that their voice is going to matter. So demonstrating the way in which that survey data is used, I think, is always tremendously important. And the other thing I would encourage us to consider, and you may be doing this, is particularly if you see a trend at one particular profession or site, pulling together a focus group to have a conversation, because there's nothing that can replace that type of dialogue and also help that employee feel heard and valued. So you may already be doing that.
It
but-
was really important to me with this survey that we could disaggregate it by division and school. I didn't even want the survey if we couldn't do that, because that lets me hone in on where the celebrations are. We can go study what's working well, and we could also look at where things are not going well. But again, it's a scoreboard and an evaluation aspect for me that, when we continue to see trends where people are not happy, then an intervention of some kind has to take place. We can't just let that continue to happen.
And Ms. Grabowski, I'll add another one. I mean, we do have employees that are just uncomfortable doing a survey, whether or not they feel that it's not anonymous or whether or not they feel that there's some interaction with their supervisor. So we have to acknowledge that's real. And so that's another facet, I think, that's why it's increasing, because it was much lower. We're above 50% now, we're at 50%, but we were lower. We got to continue to do that. But that's something we're also pressing up against, is that employees just feel, I don't want to do the survey because my supervisor's going to find out.
And we even I sent out the survey invitation, and teachers emailed me back directly. I emailed every single one of them back. So I just think people, again, feeling seen, whether I give you the answer you want or not, now that is debatable, or depending on the context, but I try to acknowledge so that people at least know that we're watching and we're paying attention.
Okay. Ms. Campbell?
I wasn't going to say anything because everyone pretty much covered everything, okay? But just to loop it all together, and that does not surprise me that Dr. Watts emailed every teacher back at all. I guess one thing I would say is I think pay is important. Yes, I think the whole picture is important. I think culture, when we talk about retention, maybe not just recruitment, but mostly retention. Yes. Culture has been the one thing that I hear almost just across the board from teachers. And I'm talking the best of the best, like we talk about keeping effective teachers. I think that if by doing the things that we can do now, that we have extended cabinet meetings, thanks to, Dr. Watts and team, and everyone can have the crosstalk as well as all the data that, Dr. Taylor kind of brings to the table too with the ROI stuff. We can look at, without someone having to complain because they're scared, we can look and say, hey, while we're trying to change the culture, we understand people feel this way, but we've noticed that there are 4 vacancies at, say, this school again, and it seems to stay this way. What is it? Is it a para and it's a specific teacher? Is it the leadership at the school? Who knows? But then we can address it in a more structured way, and I think that would be the vote of confidence, at least people that I've spoken to would be very appreciative of, because then they really do feel seen in the ways that they're maybe too scared to say. So I appreciate the work y'all are doing. This is super excellent, this presentation and what y'all have in store. So thank you.
All right. Anyone else? Okay. Thank you very much. All right. Next
presentation. And as I invite our partner, Sheena Gordon-Roberts, up to the podium, as well as Paige Cooley, our budget director, up to the podium to provide this financial update, I want to continue to reinforce our continued commitment to financial transparency and responsible stewardship, and most importantly, disciplined governance. as we move forward in this budget cycle, it's essential. We didn't have a finance committee meeting this month, but this is our finance committee meeting, right? Because I think it's important that we build shared understanding of historical trends, structural realities, and the improvements that we're working to make so that you all are equipped with decision-making power as we move forward. So this presentation is going to outline some opportunities and some challenges that we have inherent in our budgeting process. I'm excited about it because it's getting us on the road of being able to forecast better, looking at growth trends, fund balance implications. There's going to be a lot packed into this presentation for you all. And just know that these things may seem technical, but they are critical drivers in how we make decisions. So this work is about our new budget season, our ongoing work around financial stewardship, and I'm excited to have both Alvarez and Marcel, our partner, as well as Paige Cooley from our finance office, provide this information to you today.
Thank you, Dr. Watts. And just to kick it off again, we've been really fortunate to be able to partner with the finance department to get all the data, all the resource, all the backup, all the explanation, historical context. That's been helpful in sort of painting the picture of where we've been and where we need to sort of get to as we continue to evolve this budget process, but also the financial function overall. As Dr. Watts said, this presentation will cover three main areas. We'll look at revenue and expenditure trends over time. We'll talk a little bit about the fund balance trend. And what we think is kind of the most important part is what we've learned from doing this historical view and how we're going to implement improvements going forward to correct for some of the challenges that we've experienced. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Paige Cooley to talk through our revenue and expenditure trends.
Thank you and good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Revenue history trend. This slide shows upward trend in total revenue along with the decrease in student enrollment. Growth is influenced by rising property values, which is our tax digest growth, millage rate adjustments, state QBE funding increases as state QBE is enrollment-driven, and inflationary impacts. Recently, revenue growth has not always directly mirrored enrollment. Budgeted to actual revenues. Historically, our school district has taken a conservative approach when protecting general fund revenues. Budgeted figures are often lowered than actual collections to reduce financial risk and avoid mid-year shortfalls. The primary drivers of revenue variance include property tax revenue, which has been stronger than projected due to continued increases in assessed property values. While overall enrollment may have declined, the composition of students shifted towards higher weighted programs, which has increased our QBE earnings beyond projections, and interest income has increased significantly in recent years due to rising interest rate environment. One change that's happened recently is the Chatham County Tax Commissioner's Office, we used to receive our money monthly, now we receive it weekly. Well, that allows for us to gain more interest income on our money. Title ad valorem tax collections have also been stronger in recent years. Medicaid reimbursement revenue has increased due to improved documentation and billing practices. Growth in eligible student services and expanded service identification as more eligible services were captured and reimbursed. Collections have exceeded prior projections. Other small contributors included facility rentals, insurance recoveries, E-rate reimbursements, and sale of surplus property. Property tax revenue trends. Property tax revenue has increased due to growth in assessed property values and Savannah-Chatham County development. Even as millage rates were reduced, revenue increased due to digest growth. Local funding has become a stronger share of the overall budget over time. QBE revenue trends. QBE funding is based on student FTE counts, full-time equivalent counts, and program weights. Funding fluctuates with enrollment changes and state budgeting decisions. In recent years, even though overall enrollment has declined, the district has experienced growth in high-weighted programs. When the proportion of students in these programs increases, total QBE earnings can rise even if total headcount declines. In addition, statewide increases in per pupil allotments or the restoration of previously withheld QBE funds can also contribute to rising revenue. So while enrollment is an important driver, it is not the only factor influencing state revenue. The composition of student services matters significantly. In summary, state revenue has increased because a larger percentage of students enrolled in programs that receive higher funding weights under Georgia's QBE formula. General fund expenditures budget to actuals. There are several common drivers of this variance. One is position vacancies and staffing timing. Unfilled instructional or support positions, there can be delays in hiring and mid-year retirements or turnovers. Personnel costs make up the majority of the general fund budget, about 85% on average. Vacancy rates generate significant savings. Conservative budgeting of salaries and benefits. The budget is built assuming all positions are fully staffed. Benefit rates are estimated conservatively. The district significantly increased the vacancy factor in fiscal year 2026 to address this issue. Department spending has not been fully utilized. Some schools and departments have not spent full allocations. There have been delays in supply purchases and projects have been postponed or reprioritized. Contingency and risk planning. The budget has included a cushion for fuel cost, volatility, utility fluctuations, inflationary pressures, and emergency needs. When these risks do not materialize at projected levels, expenditures fall below budget. This impacts our fund balance. Because revenues have exceeded projections and expenditures have been below budget, the net effect has been growth in the general fund balance. This does have some positive impacts. This can improve our financial stability, which I believe we have done that over the past several years. Those of you who have been here a while can remember when we were having to do TANs in order to make sure we could meet payroll. This provides liquidity during downturns, and it reduces risk of mid-year cuts to our school system. The consistent expenditure overrun reflects conservative financial management. However, it also suggests that refinement of expenditure forecasting assumptions may improve budget precision. Thank you.
Thank you, Paige. Oh, here's the clicker, sorry. Moving along in the presentation, one of the things we wanted to give you all a view on was the difference in expenditures as it relates to central office. versus those that are sort of more school-facing, student supporting. And so as you can see, the dark green bar at the bottom are those school student supporting salaries. It is the vast majority of the funding, of the expenditures that come out of the district. There's an additional kind of, if we look at the FY26 budget, $55.7 million that's provided for sort of student supporting expenditures. So those funds that it sort of takes to run programs that sit within the school budgets. There's also a fair amount of central office expenditures that actually are serving students. So when we think about learning management systems, a lot of the programs that sit within, the Office of Instructional Excellence, for example, or within operations, those things actually serve the schools, but because they're coded to departments, it shows up as a central office expenditure. And then we do have, the central office expenditures for benefits and salaries. And we'll talk a little bit more about that on the next slide where you can kind of see what it looks like. But given it has grown over time, not really driven by sort of an explosion in the head count, but really just as we see the cost and things, benefit increases, COLA increases over time, the impact of those changes. When we look at the personnel budget in more detail, we see about 77% of the salaries are at school. So those schools, direct school supporting salaries. There's another 7% of salaries that we see, paraprofessionals, school psychologists, bus drivers, that are coded to central office departments, but they really are student-facing. The remaining 16% of those salaries, about $93.5 million, are salaries that are more administrative in nature. And that 16% is pretty typical of what we see for school districts of your size and scope. And it really just aligns with the amount of staffing and the infrastructure that's needed to run a school district like Savannah-Chatham County. So Paige talked a little bit about the fund balance and how the relationship between revenues and expenditures has contributed to growth in fund balance over the years. And so as you can see on this page, you see sort of the combination of the assigned and the unassigned fund balance. Your board policy relates to the unassigned portion of the fund balance. That's kind of free and clear for any use. Your assigned portion are things that you've restricted for certain usage. In more recent history, a lot of that usage has been for capital projects, namely related to the 208 Bull Street renovation project. And so you'll see going from 2025 into 2026, there was a $63 million decrease in the assigned portion of the fund balance. And that was actually moving that money from the general fund, where it was being held, into the capital projects fund, where it will be expended largely for that project, but other uses as well. So when we think about where the audit reflects that you will end FY26, so this past June, that $194.7 million is really in line with where we would expect you to be, right? You're comfortably above your 2-month expenditure policy minimum for the unassigned fund balance, but well below sort of that 5-month minimum where you're sort of triggering excess fund balance and you need to have a spend down plan. So what do we take away from this? Some of the key financial trends that we've identified. We've talked about sort of that unpredictable revenue growth driven largely by the growth in property taxes over time, and the fact that property taxes have been challenging for the district to forecast. Revenue forecasting in general, when we think about not only the dynamic of property taxes, but also the QBE earnings and how the change in student mix and student needs has contributed to more revenue despite the fact that the enrollment has declined. The overestimation of expenses and underestimation of revenue. While that can be helpful in terms of making sure we don't go over budget, it may sort of require us to either raise more money from a revenue perspective or not be fully allocating all the expenditures that we can from an expense perspective. And so we may not be getting the full sort of use of our resources by sort of maintaining that dynamic of overestimating our expenses and underestimating the revenue. And then the staffing and expenditure growth, right? Those things have continued to grow, particularly as we're incorporating some of those COLA adjustments, as well as the raises that have been granted, particularly in the past couple of years. So what do we do about it? I know that over the past few years, you all have been reducing the millage rate. And one of the things we think there's an opportunity to do is increase the analytical rigor around the process of identifying what the millage rate should be so that you're getting closer to the amount of revenue that you actually need based on the expenditures that you're projecting to have. The improved budgeting accuracy. One of the things that A&M has been brought in to do is building that financial model to give you a better outlook into what your expenditures are expected to be, what your revenues are expected to be, and how you can better plan against those, not only in the current year, but thinking forward into the out years as well. And the thoughtful budget process. When we think about some of those overruns and expenditures and things like that, being able to go through the zero-based budgeting process that all the chiefs are diligently working through now with their teams, it really calls into question every single line item of expenditures. Do we really need it? Are we budgeting the right amount? So that when we go to ask for revenue, it's more tied in reality with what we will need. Now, granted, I also want to just reflect that the portion that we're doing now is just the central office departments, right? There is still sort of a school side of this that will need to be changed. But I think the start, right, the crawl, walk, run model, getting the central office expenditures in line with where they need to be so that we can accurately think about the revenues associated with is really important. The other piece there is aligning to the strategic priorities. Dr. Watts has talked a lot about the strategic plan and the work that's being done around that. And so we want to make sure that when we're thinking about the resource investments that we're making from a budgetary perspective, it aligns with what we're saying our priorities are, and we're using that zero-based budgeting process to do that. Incorporating the program inventory and ROI assessment into the department budgeting. So really thinking about, again, the ROI program inventory items that we've talked about before, but how we can really think about, are we getting the returns that we expect from the resources that we're investing to sort of drive outcomes for students within the district? And that really leads us into those start, stop, and continue frameworks. What are the things that aren't giving us the results we need? What are those things that we need to start doing that we haven't done yet to sort of accelerate results? And what are the things that will continue because they are getting us those returns that we need? We wanted to give you all a look forward in the budget timeline, particularly as it relates to the board meetings and when and what you can expect to hear from A&M as well as the finance team over the next several months. So today we're at the sort of February 18th board meeting. In March, that'll be when we'll talk through the finance committee. We'll be able to give some insight into the revenue forecast, reviewing against the priorities preview, and then give you some indications on what that public engagement period will look like in terms of surveys and outreach to provide the public an opportunity to provide input into the budget process. During the board retreat later in March, we'll have a discussion around key priorities and how that aligns with where the budget is getting to that point. March 31st is kind of the date when the preliminary budget will be presented on, and there'll be the opportunity to provide insight and feedback there. The April 8th regular board meeting, again, will provide an update on where things are. You'll see the public engagement period goes from end of March through sort of middle of May, where we'll have the public hearings on the budget in May. The tentative budget will be in the millage rate adoption early in June, public hearing later in June, and then the final adoption of the millage rate and the budget at that June 24th special board meeting. So with that, we open it up for questions that you may have.
Okay, Dr. Hoskins-Brown.
Thank you very much for this analysis, both of you. It's extremely helpful and generates a number of questions for me. So on the use of the budget versus actuals, on slide 7, my comment is that this takeaway of us consistently overestimating expenditures seems like it's yelling for an opportunity for supervisors to better use our budget versus actual statements on a monthly basis as a planning tool. And so my question about that is, well, my additional comment is that I love the emphasis of the zero-based budgeting, because then you have to use your budget versus actuals to know where you are, rather than looking at it as, okay, whatever's left on the budget versus actual or unused, that's going to automatically be rolled over. I really do appreciate that you're like, no sir, no ma'am, that this is zero-based budgeting. Watch what you're spending, ask for what you need, and spend what you get effectively. So I'm really hoping that managers will use it more as a planning tool. Has there been any conversation around that?
Yeah, I will say, and Dr. Watts, I know you have sort of incorporated more of the budget to actual review and other conversations, but I'll at least say for the process, right? One of the things that we think about is, we're about halfway through the school year. We understand that there's some things that are seasonal, right? Like maybe there's more sports in the spring, those things will pick up, right? But if we're looking at your budget mid-year and you've used 10% and you're asking us for the same amount next year, let's talk about what you really need, right? And so those are the types of discussions that we're having. And I think, as you kind of get to a more streamlined view of your budget in terms of like, okay, this is what I actually need, right? If we're seeing year over year that underspending and you come and it's the exact same number in this year, there's a disconnect in terms of what you need and what you're asking for, and what we're really getting people to get down to is what you need. And I can just say, we're going through some of the sheets, and people are taking that to heart, right? We are seeing people saying, you know what, we've had this in our budget a couple years, we haven't had expenditures in it, we're not going to ask for it again. And so that is starting to happen.
Go ahead.
Also say that it has allowed us to increase everyone's literacy and proficiency around reading some of these reports, because things are coded one way. A manager may see that as one thing. The finance department may be coding it as something else. So we've been able to clean up and provide a lot of clarity and shared understanding. We're not there yet. This has been painful. But I think in the long run, it's going to benefit us. One of the things that you'll see today that you'll be endorsing that this has helped us do is look at funds that, or lines that are underspending, and reallocate those funds towards things that we know are getting traction across our district in terms of student achievement, address safety and facilities. So not leaving it in a particular area just to see it, and then at the end of the year, we have to roll it into fund balance. But what pivots can we make mid-year to ensure that those funds are being used on the students this year? Because that's what the money was allocated for.
That's helpful. I have a couple other questions, but in response to what you said, have you thought about the use of spending plans for folks who are struggling in spending in a timely manner? Like, for example, there's some balloon activities. That many field trips happen in the spring, and so that line's going to be unused, and all of a sudden there's going to be a balloon.
Yes.
The same thing with professional development, graduations, ceremonies. There's some things that are seasonal, and when that season comes, everything's going to be spent. For some funds that I work with, they require a spending plan. They want to know, when are you going to have all of this expended? So because we are watching your spending, and because there's a seasonality, like everything I'm interested in is eating, swimming, and reproducing in the spring. So I'm going to have very little activity. It is, the oysters, crab, shrimp, in the winter, I'm not spending a lot. But in the spring, there's going to be a lot of boat time, a lot of travel, a lot of fuel, a lot of nets. So spending plans, that's one way that budget managers don't have to check with me every month to know what my spending is going to be. They can look at my spending plan and know she's going to blow everything in March. Has there been any conversation?
So
around that?
because many of our conversations now are happening in rooms together, and I'm many times in the room, those same comments and my understanding of when that boom of spending is going to hit, I have that, but I think as we evolve, a spending plan is probably where we need to go, so that a chief is not having to remind me, oh, there's money sitting here, but I'm going to need that at graduation time. But right now, because we're just in kind of the infancy there's just a lot of conversation and need happening. So that awareness is coming to me more organically than through a plan.
Okay, well, thank you. You looked at the expenditures over the time period of 22 to 26. Fund balance history 22 to 26. And then looking at overestimation of expenses and underestimation of revenue, absolutely agree. We were just kind of holding on, not we personally, but the formal we, holding on to pockets of funding. Part of the contributions to that planning process, as I heard it from leadership and staff, was cost per square foot in construction fluctuating. Sometimes it's really, really high. Sometimes it's a little bit lower on the basis of sourcing challenges. And sourcing challenges were really big between 20 and 23 because we had all of these ships and containers just sitting outside the port waiting to come in, or personnel to work them shortly after the pandemic. So I know that there were reasons for not estimating well that were happening across the world at some times. But with the exceptions of tariffs that we don't know how they're going to affect us, have we reached a place where we can budget better based on inflation alone? Like all those other extraneous things that were out there, are they pretty much gone and now it's inflation, tariffs, and we can estimate budgets more properly?
I mean, I think so, and I think that's part of the exercise that we're going through. If we look at, I'm just going to go back here, but you guys may be able to see the whole. The trend over time has actually gotten, I would say if we look at 22, 23, 24, we were somewhere between 35 and 40 million a year in terms of underspending. In 2025, we were at 11.8 million, which is pretty, that's reasonable given the size of your budget, right? In terms of hitting that expenditure budget, the actuals coming in where you're expecting the budget to be. And so I think as we go through this exercise that we're doing now, particularly with the zero-based budgeting, we'd expect to see a much closer relationship there. Now, if some, act of God happens and such that, things can't come in the same way, obviously those things are not known right now, but I think based on the knowns, I think we will be in a position to get much closer.
Can I add to that? Because I don't know that 2 points came through that I really wanted to be emphasized today. So I want to restate them just in case they weren't heard. There are some things within our control. And that yellow box up at the top is very much, is that the one that says we underspend what we budget?
Overestimate.
We overestimate. That one, we're working on. What we cannot often control, very unpredictable, is the tax commissioner's assessment of where what our revenue will be is often way lower than what we actually get, and we don't get the real number until after our budget is passed.
Right.
So we are, in some ways, taking a stab at the dark. We don't know because we are taking a very conservative approach based on what we're getting from the tax office. And that has come in exponentially more every year. So that's accounting for some of this. And then the other piece is the state QBE piece. The timeline for that is also off. We budget and then we find out what we're actually getting. So the timelines are off, which makes this increasingly hard. And I think that statement is somewhere on a slide, but that was really one of the biggest issues that, just the unpredictability and the timelines is very difficult.
Thank you.
I think sorry, not to add to your ad, but I think one thing that I will also sort of give credit to is that yesterday the Finance Department actually met with the Tax Commission to try to talk about what are the strategies that can be put in place to get a better, sort of a more close alignment between what you expect to yield from the millage rate that you all adopt and what you actually yield from the millage rate you adopt. So those are some of the kind of actions that are already being put in place to be able to sort of better plan and reduce the unpredictability
And I have one other question.
Okay.
But thanks for that. Well, but we can predict that because the legislature has already handled part of that with the over revenue with the new exemption. And the exemption should have some level of we can do a 10-year correction factor for how much have we collected versus what we anticipated. So that can be a linear relation. We can figure out that based on the previous revenues. Now, we'll need a year or two of what we see after the new exemption, but we can figure that out mathematically. So I think that narrowing of that margin can be done, and I'm confident in that. Now, the other thing with the actuals, though, that's what we actually spent, and this includes balloon spending. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna lose my funding, let me spend a whole bunch. So I don't think that these actuals are as tightly aligned with, this closer, more frugal spending than the next 5 years of actuals are going to be, because all of these are informed by that I'm gonna have a rollover. So I hear how we're using them. I don't have a problem with them. I'm going to be excited to see later on how the new behaviors will be, because you will be in zero-based budgeting. Okay, so my last question is, there is a comment. There's a public perception. There's always been this public perception, I think it persists, that central office is top-heavy in salaries. And so you say on slide 8 that the expenditures have increased by 19.6 and 17% respectively. And you have that broken out on the next slide in terms of salary and supplemental pay. And people are very keenly focused on salary and supplemental pay at central office. So my question for you is, how is this comparable for other districts, that level of what we're investing at central office?
Yeah, it is. One of the things and that was one of the things that when we were putting together this presentation, particularly we wanted to sort of isolate, because like I said, there are some roles at central office, like there's a paraprofessional that's working, maybe across schools, so they're not coded to a school, right? So we wanted to back that out as well. But that 16% is kind of standard for a district of your size. So that was not alarming to us when we saw that 16%. And sort of maybe goes a bit against that narrative that central office is bloated with kind of salaries and people in that nature. And if we think about sort of, there are other roles that are even included in that 16% that still have a lot of interaction with student. They must not be as direct student facing, right, as a bus driver or as a paraprofessional.
Thank you. That's helpful for people to know, because as a company, you do this all around the nation. You're not just our person telling us what we want to hear. Mm-hmm. You do this for many, many districts, and so it may be that people don't love that level of investment, but it's not different than what you see in other places.
I asked specifically that we talked about this because I wanted to know, because I hear the same narrative, and that consistent answer has been given. However, it was also explained that that's something that I need to watch very closely year over year so that it doesn't get out of line. But can you talk about what some of those other positions are that's in that 17%? Doesn't that include bus drivers?
So the bus drivers are in the 7%. So there's bus drivers, there's paraprofessionals, there's school psychologists. Those we've pulled into the 7%. In the 16%, roles like campus police, that's still kind of in that 16%. That's not pulled out into the 7%. So again, roles that are, still very much student-facing, but aren't sort of directly in the classroom or sort of touching students on a day-to-day.
All right. First, Mr. Kachmar, then Dr. Howard Hall, Ms. Campbell, then Ms. Hall.
Okay. Going to the timing of when we get our QBE and our local tax dollars, our fiscal year is mandated by state law, correct? Mm-hmm. Are those other factors mandated by state law as well, like the timing of when property tax collections are calculated and delivered to us, and QBE calculations and disseminations by DOE?
Yesterday, I asked the tax assessor's office, and their deadline that they have to get it to us is July 1st.
Yeah, is that
And like
state
last
law?
year, it was at the beginning of June.
Understood. Is that state law? That's what our goal is?
I believe that as far as, I don't know if it's a state law, but they said that they have to have the numbers to us by July 1st through the I think it's a Department of Revenue. I'm not sure if that's a law, but they did say that that was the last possible day that they can give us those numbers. Now, as far as the QBE, I don't know about what their law is on it. I know we usually get those numbers in like April. We used to a long time ago get them in March, and then it's kind of gotten later. I'm hoping they'll go back since we've been a long time since COVID. Ever since COVID, everything's kind of slowed down. They'll go back to getting them to us sooner, but I don't know if
I
that is a
think your
law.
question is what we actually get. What we actually get, we don't get that until after we budget, right? After our budget is
Okay,
passed.
so the point is not when do we get it, or when do we hope we get it? What I'd like to know is what are those agencies required to do? What are their?
I got it.
We're required to have a budget by June 30. So what I'd
Mr.
love to do is
We
sit
don't know.
down with DOE and our current legislative representatives and county tax commissioners and say, from a timing perspective, it makes no sense for you to give us our real numbers, but require us to adopt a budget a month before we do that. It's always going to be out of whack. If it's a simple, here's what you do, here's how what you does affects what we do, is there a way to reconfigure what we're required to do or what you're required to do so we're all more efficient? That's a conversation to be had.
And I want to make sure, am I understanding that we don't get the actuals until after we pass a budget?
That's not correct.
Okay, well, maybe I have a
We get
misunderstanding.
them about a couple of weeks before we do, but the problem is, we're going to have to know like what the millage rate is before that in order to do some, like when we decide the millage rate on the day of the adoption, there's no time to go in there and
Right.
change their numbers
So the
because
ti-
their
it is a
numbers are
timing
based on a
issue.
full rollback.
That's my point. The timing issue, we just need to have a conversation with our partners on the timing of when we get information. That's all I'm saying.
Well, I know-
Because we're mandated by state law to do something by the 30th. If they're not, and we can cajole them to change their process, that's going to be helpful to us.
I know Mr. Gillenwater was, he came out and spoke with us for a long time yesterday. He is the chief tax assessor for the county. And he was, he really tries to get them. He said he's aiming for middle of May. But he says with all these changes in the law that he's not sure that it may be later. So he can't, but he told me that he has to get them to us by July 1st.
I get it, and this is not a criticism of you or anybody in this room or anybody else. If it's a process issue that we can address, that's all I'm talking about. All right.
it.
On the conversation about school salaries and benefits versus support versus central office, we historically asked the question, what's typical on that and on lots of other things, but we can't really answer that question until we know what are the apples being counted across the district. So I would love to know if you have data from the district, maybe it's disaggregated so we can't identify each district by name, but we put bus drivers, finance, HR in this bucket across these 37 districts. Then we're comparing apples to apples. So is that kind of data available? Because I do think 16% falls within the bell curve. Typically, it's 9 to 21% administrative overhead in government from the very preliminary research I've done. But I want to know it's apples to apples.
Right.
So do you or does some other entity have that data where the classifications of roles are similar
Yeah.
across districts.
We could take a look at it just to see, it would sort of be kind of a benchmarking exercise to kind of
Right.
see where you all would fall there, sort of looking at the various classifications. We could take a look at that and sort of think about how we could sort of provide a more granular analysis for that.
So maybe?
Yeah, I wanted to like contextualize it in the scope of everything else, just to make sure that, we're being responsive to all the things in our purview. But I think it's a worthwhile exercise. I just want to make sure that as we go through the exercise of getting and accumulating all that data and doing that, it sort of aligns with all the other things we have planned, particularly with the budget process and where we are. So I think it's a worthwhile exercise. It's just a matter of who does it and when. But yeah.
And I'm not trying to create work. What I'm asking is if we have it, let's see it. That's what I'm really
I
asking.
don't think we have it
Yes.
readily made.
Not we, but they. That's their job. That's what they do for districts across the county or across the country. And that's all I'm asking. Okay.
Yeah.
On our expenditure budget to actuals, it's interesting to see all this because for the last 5+ years in June, I and other board members will be like, hey, we always overestimate vacancy factors. We always find 20 or 30 or $40 million in extra when we do the budget reconciliation and we get the final numbers in November or December. Can't we please cut the millage rate or, find funding for this or that? And the response is always no until we have the numbers. So now because we're seeing that trend that we would raise anecdotally every year, we see it on both the revenue side and on the expenditure side. So I see about $125 million in 4-year excess budget estimations versus actual expenditures. So my first question, and this goes back to my comment about apples to apples, I'm all for some flexibility and contingency in funding and planning. Is $125 million over 4 years excessive? And
Yes.
okay.
Yeah.
And then second, what I've noticed is, $40 million in 22, $35 million in 23, $41 million in 24. That doesn't show a downward or upward trend, but then we go from $41 million in 24 to $11 million or $12 million in 25. Is that because we have changed budgeting practices and estimating practices? Is it because we've done zero-based budgeting? Is it because we've done ROI? Or is it because inflation just made everything much more expensive, so we spent a lot more money? Or a combination of all of that?
Yeah, I would say it wouldn't be the zero-based budgeting because that's going to affect in the first year you would start to see that is the FY27 budget. But I'll let Paige kind of talk through that because I know that
Sir, I think it is a combination of all of those factors you were naming. The fact that we realize that, I will say one of the reasons, and it is great, and I think we are doing a lot better on our vacancy factor, but I have, over the years of working here for 30+ years, the school system does best in hiring when the economy is going down or is bad. We have very little vacancy then. And as you can kind of see, we're starting to not have as much vacancies now because like you see, the cost of things have gone up. The economy in some regards is great if you're looking at the stock market, but that doesn't always filter down to everyone. So I do believe that that's one of the reasons right now, depending on the economy, our vacancy rate is going to go down. I remember in 2008 when things were really bad, we literally at one time had hired a few too many teachers, if you can even believe that now. We were having trouble placing people. That was great. We had some extras, but that can happen real quick because it wasn't but a few years before that we were having vacancy problems prior to 2008 too. So I do think it is a business cyclical thing. But all of these factors, we have learned, I think we started realizing, we have started some new things that we have been putting in place. We may not have a spending plan like Dr. Hoskins Brown mentioned, which I think is a great idea, but we did start last year doing spending reports that were given out to all the cabinet members that they shared with the school sites, and we had asked everybody to please spend their non-salary dollars and get at least, unless you had a reason, 70% spent by the end of February, instead of people holding on to money until the last minute, ordering things. They didn't come in until after the fiscal year ended, which put them in next year's budget, not the current year we were in. If you don't receive the item by June 30th, it can't be counted this year. So it's almost like they're wasting the money for 2 years because it encumbers it in 1 year and then it's expended in the next if they don't get it in time. So we've tried to educate people into realizing that. It's been pushed down. We've been doing reports and budget to make it easier. We do have the new system. It's not really new. We've had it for 5 years, but people are just starting to learn. We've been trying to do a lot of education on how to read the spending reports, work with these people that are having trouble spending. So I think that one of the reasons it did get better last year, and then this year, the big thing that has happened that I do want to mention is that we increased the vacancy factor by a tremendous amount from last year.
Decrease.
I mean, well, it takes it away, but we went from like about 9.5 million in a vacancy factor, which is a credit amount, which is money we give back out to the schools, to go into around 22.5 million, because we didn't want to see those. So we go and give the money back out to the schools immediately, because when you credit it, it gives you money to go back and give money out to the schools. So we increased that a lot. So that put another, $13-14 million into the budget, because we anticipated vacancies to continue to go up. Now, I'm a little, seeing the way that the economy is trending, I'm not so sure that we may next fiscal year want to keep it that high, but that, that isn't my decision to make. But we would want to look at the historical, and working here with A&M to see that might need to get back down, trend downward. So, but that is one big thing that's in there this year that is eating up a lot of the salaries that wasn't in there last year. So we did try to, it's not like we're going, oh, we're trying to get this big balance. We're trying to bring it down and use strategies to do that.
Understood. And
ESSER have something to do with some of these overages too. We had a lot of things in ESSER which freed up general funds, but now the ESSER's gone.
we knew that was a 2 or 3 year process of planning.
Right.
And also that interest income has gone up tremendously, and I know has been brought up. It just keeps going up, and then the way we're getting our money has increased. Also, the Medicaid, they're doing a great job in our district for Medicaid reimbursements. That has gone millions more. That just keeps growing. So there are other factors other than the property that's coming in now too, to be given reasons why we're, coming up with more money. It's not just the property tax, although that has been great, but we're now, I know that we don't want to have too much, but if you can go back to a time when we didn't, how we were able to go through the pandemic and survive it very well compared to a lot of districts, because we had gotten from having not enough money in fund balance to getting our fund balance where it's supposed to be. And right now, it's right where it's supposed to be. We can't do all these programs to help the children if we don't have money to do it. Like for the literacy, it's expensive to do some of these things. And if you keep taking the money down, we have to go bare bones again. And that's what we were at. And pay was so low that we couldn't even get people to come work here. So please remember those bad times and realize that this isn't as terrible as people are making out, because we are now fiscally sound and it has helped our district, and that's why we're striving to do better things with our money.
So just to be clear, I'm not sitting here saying our millage rate should be 0, and I'm not being critical of what we're finding. I think what we're doing is a very worthwhile exercise, and we're doing a lot of good things. I'm looking at like polishing the silver, right? Like, we're doing a lot of good things. We do have to spend money. We do have to make investments. But you made a point that I'd like to emphasize in a different way. You just went through a litany of programs and micro analytics that together impacted a number, right? So it's not just this or just that, but we got really good at Medicare estimates. We got really good at 4 other things. Combined, that led to higher revenue. I mean, just letting money sit early and not spending it in EastBlost in year 1 has increased interest revenue, right? But little things like that we've gotten really good at A, B, C, and D add up to higher revenue, less expenditures. It means the process is better. We can point to individualized puts and takes, but put together, if we're better in a lot of little areas, it leads to a better budget process. So I want to make 2 final comments and then I'll shut up because I know other people want to talk. Number 1, there's a tension between zero-based budgeting and a spending plan. Spending plan is here's your money, tell us how you're going to spend 100%. Zero-based budget, and I'm being very simplistic, zero-based budgeting is justify everything you spend money on. So we could do it at a big picture level. But what we also see in this district, but also in lots of businesses, is here's your budget. It's $100 million. So somebody manages their $100 million budget, and they realize, I got my labor costs really wrong. So I'm going to pull, say that was $50 million, and they had $30 million in capital investments. I'm just going to take all the money from capital investments to cover my labor costs because I misestimated. And so what that does is it creates an imbalance in your capital investments that year and maybe next year and maybe the following year. So, but then they say like, hey, I stayed within my $100 million budget. Didn't I do a great job? Well, no, you didn't. So when you're managing your budget, it's not just did you stay within your cap, it's are you managing within, each piece within. And so when we get better at managing each piece within, that's a better exercise to me of managing, coming up with a spending plan, managing the spending plan so that we're not putting and taking from other areas that need it. Because if we take from our capital, I mean, our facilities and maintenance is a great example of that. For years and years and years, we had a huge EastBlost budget. We had a huge capital investment project or budget, but we wouldn't also include the piece for ongoing maintenance of what we just built. And our maintenance budget was $500,000 when we had a $400 million district budget. One year we got it up to $5 million, and then the pandemic hit, and we went back. And then what happens? We look at our facilities condition index. We look at, oh my gosh, we have to do all this extra work. We're pulling money out of fund balance, and we're devoting a lot of EastBlost money to replacement or bringing it up to current code. If we had invested in maintenance all along, maybe we have different money. We're putting double what we put into capital or double into technology or things that could help the classroom as opposed to fixing buildings that we let linger for too long.
Can you say that again? Can you define, can you say that again, how you define a spending plan?
Rewind the tape.
Yeah, no, I just,
Go watch the video. I mean,
okay, I can, no, that's all right, I can do that, that's fine.
okay, I guess what I'm saying is there's different ways to define, there's different ways to monitor what we're doing, right? It's either the big picture budget or the micro budget. That's all. That's all the only point I'm making. And so when we're looking at our spending, it's our budget is X dollars, but we have to look at each subcomponent of what we're spending and manage each subcomponent as well. And like food service is another great example. For years and years and years, it was under budgeted. And because there was this stated goal of it has to be self-supporting, right? Where did that come from? I don't know. And so we would then pull money from all these various places to fill the hole in food service. So I think what we're doing is fantastic. None of this is critical. This is, hey, let's take us to the next level. But when we're looking at spending plans, it's not just managing the timing of spending, but we should be looking at individual departments Are you managing the sub-components of your spending plan, not just the total number? And then finally, and I promise I will shut up, fund balance. The state says 2 months, right? Our policy is 5. I think that's our outside cap. And I'm of the firm belief that given why we have a fund balance, it's for huge disasters. When a hurricane hits here, we're not going to have to find $2 million to clean up some leaves. We're going to have to find $80 million to clean up 60 sites. So my personal view is we are on the side more towards 3 or 4 months and not just 2 months bare minimum. And now I'll be quiet. Thank you.
Real quick just on that, and then I won't make any more comments. No, never mind. Okay.
Okay,
Yes,
you'll
it
be
will.
in queue.
You'll make us connect.
You'll be in queue. Okay, Dr. Howard Hall.
I promise I'm not long-winded. I won't be that long. Key takeaways. One thing that I do notice of cautious budgeting. That's been highlighted, overestimating of expenses and underestimation of revenue. This is year 8 for me on the school board, and we have managed yearly for our millage rate to trend downward. But there's always been fear of a full rollback. And one of the reasons why, if we actually have a full rollback, what will happen if there's a recession or due to inflation? That means that the following year, now we have to recover and increase the millage rate. So it's been cautiously done yearly by not actually having a full rollback due to that. So do you foresee, are we moving towards the direction of maybe one day possibly ever getting to the point that we can actually have a full rollback?
And Paige, I don't know if you want to talk through this too, but I think it's one of the challenges that you get in sort of that property tax, where you're budgeting and sort of where your actuals come in. But Paige, do you want to, I know you've been kind of talking through the rollbacks too.
Yes, I mean, we can, this is a board decision, we can always do a full rollback, but like she said, the amount that we have been doing for raises for employees and stuff, if you don't want to be going into fund balance, it's a fine line. Every year you have to look at it and see, this may be the year, because we are doing such a scrutiny, you can't, justify every penny that you get as far as departments, that we might, it's a possibility. You'll have to look at it and weigh the options. We're looking more extensively at the budget so that we budget more accurately as much as possible. But I certainly don't want to over budget and then we come in and we don't have enough money to pay what we've said. That's a very scary thing too. So we're trying to refine it and get it as close to that point, because a budget is a best estimate based on historical data and what's going on currently. So that's what we're doing. And our goal is obviously to have as low a taxes as possible, but yet still be able to provide for the children and what they need for their educational values so they can be successful in the world. So there is a fine balance on that. You have to decide what is the most important to you. Is it to have the cheapest property taxes and maybe have more of a bare bones, or is it, to have extra things? You have to, there's a balance in there. You can be too high, too low. You have to come to that. That's where I'm glad I'm not in your shoes to have to make that call. We just have to get the numbers for you and try to do the best job we can so that you can look at it and make the right decision based on our data. And that's why I'm really happy that we have A&M here to kind of be like that person to look beside us and see things that we can do better and project even a better budget and come in closer to what we are actually spending.
So the opposite words are overestimation and accuracy. Because of course we want our students to have the best education, we do. But at the same time, we want to ensure that we are actually being more accurate than overestimating and cautiously budgeting when we can actually save taxpayers at the same time.
Yes. And making sure that everyone in the district understands how to spend their budget and not, it seems like they've been in a mode where they've been scared to spend it and save it till it's at the end of the year. And we've tried to say, no, this is for the children this year. Please spend the money on the kids this year. So because, with the way it starts back over the next year. It rolls into our fund balance, but they don't necessarily get it at their school site. So yeah, that's education to make sure everybody is spending the money they do have, because that was some of the reasons. It wasn't just salaries. There was a lot of non-salary money not spent that was left on the table in the past. And that was some of the big amounts.
One of the other things, just to your point about sort of the rollback and sort of how we set the millage rate that we've talked about is how we can increase the analytical rigor. So whether it's providing more different scenarios. So if you do this and you do that, this is where you end up, so that you're able to make sort of more real time. Because it's like Paige said earlier, some of this information's coming in pretty close to the time where you all are making decisions. And so the better able we are to sort of feed you all, like, okay, if you change the millage rate to this, you roll back this much, this is what your yield will be, rather than doing that after we get all the numbers set and we know, trying to get that in more real time, and sort of giving you all the information to kind of know a little bit better where you'll end up if the numbers are sort of where they are. It's part of that analytical rigor we talk about in terms of helping to support the millage rate setting.
One last thing, and based on the trend data from the rollbacks, from reviewing and looking at the history, maybe there was a year that we probably could have actually afforded to have a full rollback based on the overage.
That is, to me, a great thing to try to, look toward. I mean, everybody would love to do the full rollback, and, hopefully we'll get better at what we're doing so that we can be the most accurate. Everybody will start spending the best way possible to get maximum results with the least amount of money, and that's what we're working for, hopefully.
Okay, Ms. Campbell?
So this is not a criticism. I think part of the reason that the budget becomes such a sore source for taxpayers is because it has gone up so much every year, outpacing inflation, as I've said many times during the budget hearings. But that our return on investment has not been good for what we've been spending money on the children for. And I think we are certainly on the right track now. I think we have a great plan. We are showing progress. We are making gains. I guess I have a clarification question first. When we say that we want to know what we're getting before setting the millage, and then I think Dr. Watts asked the question, so we don't have that number before we set the millage rate in the budget, correct? And then Ms. Cooley said, yes, we do.
We have it, like we got the assessor's number about like the beginning of June, maybe it was June 3rd, 4th, something like that.
I thought I remembered we had to postpone the meetings that we scheduled maybe slightly just because we were waiting on the tax digest. So, when I was trying to figure out where we could go with the budget to cut for taxpayers, it was like using the number that I knew from the tax digest and then figuring out what millage rate that was. And I think my concern is that we do have the values first. And I like, as we kind of discussed maybe in board accountability recently, zero-based budgeting to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, is more like, what do we need to educate students at the best level that we know is efficacious at this time? Meaning, we have return on investment, so we know that this piece is working. Maybe we want to try something new and cool and that shows efficacy in the world. Great, maybe we can try that, but don't throw it on the budget until we see a bottom dollar amount that we're already expected to spend at baseline so that we can do choices and trade-offs. So if we want Ignite more, as I do, full disclosure, dispersed throughout, to kids who need it in elementary schools, then I want to know that if I'm saying something like, oh, and I would also like to increase, this service at X facility also, that I'm not now doubling up on the requirement of the taxpayer because I don't know what the bottom dollar amount is from the beginning, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So I think we could be better at that. One of my fears is that when we say, like, based on historical data we spend, to me it seems that we've spent based on a spend growth model. Like maybe our historical data, and I believe, Ms. Cooley, that we've gotten better in certain funding avenues and figuring things out as the years have gone on, but maybe now with Tyler Munis and Bonfire and all the things working together, we'll be able to track it better, like in our last presentation we talked about in a different capacity. But hopefully we are not of the mindset, and maybe this is the question. Are we now thinking that this bottom dollar as of this year is the amount that we should be spending going forward, sans any cuts or additions for the trade-off of the cut that we just made? Like, is this what we're accepting as our bottom dollar? Or are we going through and instead of saying, okay, you have until May, make sure you spend all the money, or you have until April, are we saying, here's how much money you have to spend because these are the things we think you need to spend it on. Here's the QBE allotment at your school. Here are the students, on and on and on. And then we're saying, not just spend all that money because it's about to go away, but did you spend it? If you didn't spend it in a timely way, maybe you didn't need it. Like, are we doing that kind of stuff? Are we using the baseline from last year, like in prior years, and then going from there?
Yes.
Yeah, I was gonna say, we are not using the baseline from prior and sort of adding X, right? We're kind of going back to like, what do you need to execute the strategy and your department's charge effectively? And that is sort of what you should manage to. Thinking about Mr. Kashmar's comment around like, it's not just about staying, if it's 100 million, staying under the 100 million. If you're supposed to spend this much on X, this much on Y, and you spent twice on X and nothing on Y, there's a problem there too, right? So thinking about that total picture, it's less of sort of, we like to call it incremental budgeting, where you just add 1% to what you spent or 2% to what you spent last year. That is sort of the opposite of the exercise that the departments are going through now, because we don't want to just sort of like grow spending incrementally. We really want to get the expenditure picture to look like what you need to be the sort of flagship district that you are.
And I wanted to also echo what Mr. Kashmar was saying about kind of wanting, even if it's not public facing or private facing for us, just knowing that you've put eyes on it, because I have talked to Dr. Watts, et cetera, in the district about this like bloated admin, and I am sort of agreement, like the mindset that we are, within a reasonable, when you see the growth and you see how many FTEs have been cut over the years, et cetera. I don't know that we're like rapidly increasing it, but when I see on here on one of the slides, there was a 7% difference between the growth in like regular salaries year over year. There was 7% more growth in administrative salaries, even though the FTE had gone down. So to me, that says there is something there, right? And when we got the compensation study, one of the only areas that we were above market value was in admin, central office. Is that wrong?
We were below.
We were below, that was one of the areas we were actually below. Our
No. Yeah.
we
Yeah.
did not.
Yeah, we did.
17%,
Mr. Ray, no, we didn't.
No, we were not above. We were below on,
A1 and A3, I think, we were
yeah,
way below.
we were not above. We were below.
Because I remember going, oh, right.
And then we had a lot that were equal or where they should be. That's what you saw
I just
on it.
remember the conversation was something like, someone had said something about, Dr. Watts, we're not asking you
yeah.
to cut people's salaries. We're just saying,
Yeah.
are you planning on not having a lot of crazy growth going forward with the staff in Central? So that was why my thinking was, and I can find it later.
Yeah, and I'm not to reflect on, there were a few positions, but it was a small number of positions compared to the overall that we did have
It was
that.
by position.
Yeah, it was a few
Right.
positions. It was
Got
one
it.
position I think had it.
Again, not a criticism at all. All I am asking for is that we just, now that we have, to me, this is like a pivotal growth moment where it doesn't need to be like blaming, it doesn't need to be, casting aspersions on anybody or any team or anything, but like, let's use this to start doing it better where there are no questions and there's full transparency within reason, right? The other piece that, okay, here's the awkward question, but I do have to ask it here. When we talk, and this is the last one, I promise. When we talk about integration of Bonfire and Tyler Munis and everybody working together and things becoming more automated as we also shift to some of the AI that is coming, and we think about 85% of our budget are people, are we going to have any sort of shifts in, as we also talk about people going into teaching careers or whatever it is where we have shortages, are there going to be cuts in some of these departments if some of these positions are now deemed less necessary if we have Munis doing the work?
I'm not going to commit to that. And we're going to obviously have to see how the economy plays out, how the homestead exemptions play out. I don't want to commit either way to that, but the way I see our technology integration and the use of AI is not necessarily eliminating positions, but it alleviates the burden of hand things being done and people spending time on that, and it allows them to use their brain and their talent to do more sophisticated work. So instead of them creating a spreadsheet and spending hours looking at a spreadsheet, AI can help pull out some things, and then they can be using their talents in other ways, which I think is what is happening across the country in terms of a lot of entry-level jobs are now shifting. They don't need people to do like the baseline work anymore because you've got technology that can do that. But I don't want to commit either way to how this impacts staffing. Because I think it would be way too premature, and I do not want to send fear
Oh, gosh, no.
throughout this organization. So let me be clear. That technology is a way for us to be more efficient, a way for us to use our talents in a way that is beneficial without taking out some of the burden of the grunt work.
Awesome, thank
So
you.
I hope everybody heard me. Okay.
Okay.
Dr. Brinkman now.
I'm on the end of the train.
Yeah,
No, I thought I was.
yeah, yeah.
It's my turn?
Yes, and then Ms. Grabowski.
All right. Just very quickly, it's been wonderful to be an educator for so many years and then now to be a politician. It's very wonderful convergence of experiences. And I want us to remember what we were talking about this morning with the vacancies. And Mr. Cashmore mentioning how it would be great for us to be in the 95% of those top employees who really bring the excellence of expertise into this district. So I listen a lot, but I don't listen to everybody. I listen to people who agree that an educated citizenry is the most important thing for our country. Those are the people whose ideas I want to hear, and those are the ones whose criticisms I want to hear. So if they're the ones saying, oh, we have a bloated administration and our overhead is, I will listen to them, but I don't hear them that much because we either educate our children across the country, every child we can educate, or we spend that same money that we grumble about for prisons or for, downing criminal activity and that kind of thing. So it's all a thing of values. So I don't want Dr. Watts to not bring experts into this district because the people who don't care whether our kids are educated or not have the loudest voices and, get to rule the day. But if you believe that an educated citizenry is what's best for this country and for everybody who lives in this country, and then you have criticisms, I am so happy to hear it. But I want us as board members, as we go in and out and listen to everybody, to keep that in mind. Is there someone talking to me who really believes in the value of education and what it does to children's lives and what it does to this country and how it teaches us how to vote for people and how to engage in civic responsibilities? So who are you listening to? And Dr. Watts, in listening to me, I want you to do what is prudent, but I want the best for our children. And I want the best teachers. And as everyone was saying when we were talking on the other end, how do we keep most of our best teachers? We pay them what they deserve to be paid. And I don't want people advising you who don't know what they're talking about. I want the experts advising you. So just to kind of keep this in a perspective of we as 9 politicians, let's remember that's what we're here for, to make sure our kids get educated to the best of our knowledge, and that we're accurate and prudent in our spending. Thank you.
Ms. Grabowski and then Dr. Brinkman, I'm sorry, Dr. Brinkman, then Mr. No, Ms. Grabowski's next.
Quickly. So since you've got the fund balance up, we have our policy between 2 and 5 months as best practices. Looking at slide 7, between our budget to actuals, is there a considered best practice range if we're going to look at trends? Because the percentage, like for FY '25, the percentage of that delta is very small. So is there a recommended try and like shoot for a certain percentage range to meet the budget versus the actuals?
I mean, I think tight is somewhere around 2 to 3%, right?
Yeah.
When you think about.
'Cause
sort
this
of
is
where
less
you
than
wanna end
2%.
up. But I think, you know, the closer that you are, right? Because when we look at the budget, the budget, it's revised. So it's not sort of where you
Where we
started
started.
the year.
Okay,
It's kind of
yeah.
how you revise those estimates over time. So when you sort of go back and look kind of to your original budget, but I think as you think about where you are mid-year, you're sort of moving things around, maybe saying, you know what, we're not going to spend that much. XYZ is happening. People are maybe not sort of formal spending plans, but I know Paige has done a lot to let people know, hey, this is the end of the year. What are you going to do about this money? And sort of having some of those conversations. And so that sort of you get closer to your revised budget. Now, if you sort of look back against where your initial budget is versus that, you probably see a little bit of a bigger delta there.
Okay.
But that's sort of, given that you're revising that budget over time,
Okay.
you're expecting it to be closer.
And I guess I'm thinking back to when we adopted our original budget,
Right.
because that's where we kind of, that's our
Where you
starting, yeah.
Where you start the
Yeah,
year.
okay. And then other quick question, on slide 8, so we spent a lot of time talking about this, what apples get put in what bucket. And I agree with Mr. Kachmar, it's hard to do the apples to apples comparison. We don't know how things are classified. So I think you mentioned in the central office expenditures that includes the software that our students are using. Is that correct?
There is software,
I mean,
yes.
so that's a big ticket item if we look at all the software that's supporting our students. Why does that get coded to central versus being coded to individual schools?
I can talk about this, or Paige, you can, but, as we've looked at the budget, there's software that's bought at the school level, right? So every school doesn't buy the software individually, so it
Right.
may sit within, the Office of Instructional Excellence, but the schools are able to access it. So that's why you see.
I just think it makes it, like, our budget is confusing enough as it is, and it makes it just more confusing to understand how the money is being spent. And do we have to do it that way? So, for example, when we we've got our facilities policy on our agenda this afternoon. And if one school rents a facility from another, like 2 different schools, they have to take it out of their budget so that the other budget can account for it and their custodial staff or whatever else. So we have those systems put in place. Why can't we do that for these services that are going directly to serve our students in our schools?
I mean, there are budget places where you may have internal service funds where you sort of charge back,
Yeah.
like you charge the school back for the use of X
Yeah.
funding. So you would see, okay, this school has 28 licenses, this school has 34. You sort of attributed it sort of mathematically across
Right.
where it's spent. There is an option to do that. Right now, that's not sort of where things are. It's sort of held at the district level. So it's sort of a policy decision in terms of how you want to do that. Some people say that way is more complex than sort of having it as a district-wide sort of a license and expenditure. There's give and take to both of that, so I think it would just be something that would need to be weighed in terms of making sure that you're always sort of staying on top of what those administrative costs are by school so that you can go back and do those calculations, which can become another sort of set of analysis
Yeah.
that needs to be maintained. But again, there's trade-offs to both of them. It's just about deciding which is most valuable.
Okay.
I do want to tell you that we have been looking at the non-departmental, because what we've done in the past and through this year is if it was something bought for the whole school district, we put it in non-departmental, and not giving it to certain things. But like it is very difficult. Like she said, bus drivers and that sort of thing, they're actually not coded
Well,
to.
bus drivers I get because they're serving
Even
multiple
custodians
schools.
this year, when you do this again, it's going to look, central office has, if you really were to pull it, because we've moved the custodials, even though they're at the school, they wanted to have them centralized. So now, if we pull something, it's going to look like we've gone up in central office staff if we don't take those out when they show it to you, because they're going to be in what is an 8010, which is central office, and not coded to a facility code for the schools, because we've always in the past tried to put as much as we could at the schools, because so many things are school related. They don't have anything to do with central office, but they are housed there. There is even teacher coordinator type people that go to several schools, and they are housed centrally. And I've, said, hey, could we please put those at the schools, because it makes us look like we're very top heavy when these are not even people, they go to a different school every day. They don't stay downtown. They don't even have an office downtown. So, there is a fine line, because one of the reasons things are central is because we can get economies of scale with that. And also, if there is money, like if we budget for something and it comes in a little less, at least we have our hands and we can say, hey, we've got this money. This was a little bit less cost than we thought it was going to cost for this particular program. What do you want to do with the rest? And then the cabinet can make that call. Whereas if it's centralized at the schools and they see there's extra money, then they're going to move it and spend it in small amounts. So that's also another consideration to look at.
And I get all that, and I understand the complexities of buying something centrally and then assigning it out. I guess, Ms. Cooley, what you were just saying would be my second point, is when we have these really big buckets, and it includes, to me, it's so important to put that in black and white, what's included in that bucket, because if somebody downloads this presentation, they are not going to understand that all of those things that serve all of our students are included in that central office number. So I would, even if we don't even talk about the slide, let's include it in the presentation so that we understand and the community can understand what is being included in those numbers would be helpful.
Duly noted. Thank you.
Dr. Brinkman?
Yes, my first comment will be to the executive committee of the board. Can we please start board meetings earlier, because we like to talk?
Yes.
And now my comment on this, back, I think now it's been like 23 minutes ago when Mr. Kashmar was talking about the fund balance. I would like, yes, thank you. Y'all are great. Would like to always hit that 2-month line as like a goal, and that's it. Boom, we got that 2-month. I understand disaster. I don't know if Georgia law will allow us to just have a disaster fund that we use fund balance one time to fill. It is filled. We don't touch it unless there's a disaster, and it just sits there and collects interest. And then it is not part of our every year we have to think about, we need more fund balance for a disaster. We just have, but the board would then have to come up with what number that disaster fund should be. So we don't need to discuss now. Maybe it's illegal. I have those ideas all the time. But that would be something that I would love to discuss at finance committee or at the workshop on, like, we think about a disaster fund. The state allows it now to be tax-free for citizens to have a disaster fund. Maybe they do that for districts, or maybe we should get our state legislator to do that. But that's what I would like to see, so that this number always hits the black line, 2 months.
And Mr. Smith.
I'll be very quick. Thank you for your presentation. Quick question for you. As we look at page 17 and we see that enrollment is declining, my question is, as enrollment declines, the employees, is that a decline as well? Are we releasing employees as a result of the declining population or enrollment?
No, we have not been released any employees, because we have in the past had such a vacancy, and we still have vacancy teachers. So even if something happens that we would go down, there are spots to fill. So we haven't had that problem at all. We have not released any employees.
If we continue the trend of the decline of enrollment, how have we thought about when will we be reaching a place of dangers in that area?
That could happen, and that's why we're trying to, we did a very much more aggressive enrollment decline, as we've talked about in, past Finance Advisory Committee meetings, anticipating that. Obviously, we don't need as many staff if it keeps going down, but I do want to emphasize at the weights, even though we're going down, we have not gone down as much on, we have a lot of students that are in the higher weighted categories that you can see on this. So even, that's why we continue to go higher.
Elaborate on the higher weighted.
A higher weighted would be like, it is gifted. They have the 1.7. The base rate is on a grade 9 through 12 employee. They give you a base amount. The state comes up with it each year. And, they adjust it kind of for inflation and stuff. And then if you look at some of on this particular slide 6, it shows you special ed can be up to a 6.021, which means you take that base amount times 6.021 for every FTE, which would be 6 segments, which is 1 FTE. They look at a day of a school day, they divide it into 6 segments. So when you have a lot of children that fall in the categories of these higher weights, you can't have as many kids in a classroom. You have to have a smaller classroom, and that's why the state funds it better. Because maybe if children, if they need more individual attention or something, remedial ed, they can put more people in less kids in a classroom, so there's more individualized instruction, and they can also send teachers in there to assist. So we have not found that. Now I'm waiting for the midterm because we did have that drop this year. But, I'm curious to see, because we seem to have been holding steady in those high weighted areas. And in fact, decreasing in more of just your general ed grades, grades 9 through 12, which is a base category. That's the lowest you get, is a regular ed 9 through 12 student that is taking only regular ed classes all day. That's the lowest weight. Everything is higher than that. So we have to see, because of the fact that we do have things that we need to do for these students. Right now, we can't just cut back on the services, and we have to remain compliant with the law for special ed, for example.
Can I say something? Just Ramon Ray. Getting to your question, Mrs. Smith, about, I guess you said about employees and monitoring that. Over time, we have had reductions as it relates to enrollment or reductions in employees. We typically have been able to handle that through the attrition, because we're going to have retirees this year. We're going to have resignations this year. Every year, as long as it's in this time of year that is happening and not something that happens like in September or October, we're able to plan for it better. Teachers can teach different subjects in some cases, or different jobs. So we haven't had a need to do any RIF or anything like that in the past, because we've been able to handle it with attrition.
But should we ever need to, it is important to me to emphasize it would be based on performance. Yeah. And that's why I'm doing so much work now to try to get our evaluation system up to speed, because should the day come, it would be a performance-based RIF. I'm pretty strong. I feel pretty strongly about that.
Okay. Last question, just out of curiosity. Over the last 7 years, would you be able to tell me how the highly weighted student increase has populated the enrollment?
I could go back and get those figures. We have them available. We just have to put it together.
Okay, thank you.
We can look back at the FTE earnings sheet to kind of get an idea too.
Move to adjourn to go into exec to discuss real estate, personnel, and legal, and other stuff we're allowed to discuss in exec.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.